just take a moment to think, how was it possible that Jesus could be crucified? How is it possible for the authorities of that time, the Roman and Jewish authorities, to agree to put Jesus to death? If you review the sacred scriptures, what we would call the passion narratives, you see what happens is a gradual, over the course of days and weeks, a gradual stripping of Jesus of his humanity. From the moment where he is arrested and then tried and condemned, he's beaten, he's stripped literally of his clothing, he's made to carry the cross, and he's treated as an object, a thing. And repeatedly, over and over again, in those passion narratives, they refer to Jesus not as a person, not as a human being, but as a problem. He's a problem for us because the way he speaks about God as his Father, he's a problem. He's a problem because he's getting the people in an uproar, exciting the people, against the government, against authority. And so they look at Jesus not as a person, not as a human being, but as a problem. And the best way to get rid of him is to do away with him. We need to get rid of him. He's a problem. We need to get him away from us, to do away with him, erase him from the face of the earth, because he is inconvenient, he's troublesome, he's a problem, and we can't take him and his teaching and preaching and all that he's doing anymore. Jesus is a problem. So they do anything and everything they can to get rid of him. Some years ago, a woman with her toddler stopped me after Mass. This is probably about 10 years ago. And she said, "I really need to talk to you, Father." She said, "I have something really important to talk to you about. Can I talk to you right now?" This is after Mass, as people are going out of church. And so she pulled me aside and she said, "No, I really need a place. Can I talk?" So we went to the sacristy and she poured her heart out. She said, "You see my little boy here?" She said, "I almost killed him." I said, "Excuse me?" She said, "Well, when I was pregnant, I went to the hospital. And they did all kinds of tests and all of the things that they do, prenatal care. And they told me, your baby is deficient, will not survive, and will cause you great problems. And you should have an abortion." She said, "I struggled back and forth. She said, "I even found myself once standing right in front of the abortion clinic. Right there in front. And I almost went in." She said, "But I couldn't do it. I thought about it, I contemplated." She said, "I'm a good Catholic." She said, "But they kept telling me this baby is going to be a problem. This boy is going to be a problem. He's going to be a problem that you're going to have for a long time. He's going to inconvenience your life." And then they said, "He'll have problems, he'll struggle, he'll suffer." Well, I think now that boy is probably around 10 or 11 years old, and he's perfectly normal. By God's grace, by God's goodness, who knows? But what had to happen for that mother was she had to come to see the child not as a problem, but as God's gift. This child that could have potentially been struggling with all kinds of health issues. She had to come to see that, no, this is God's gift. He's God's gift. I think the dehumanizing aspects and elements of our culture are very strong. That they make us look at people, and in this instance, as a child within the womb, as a problem, an inconvenience, something that you can easily get rid of, something that you can easily just discard. They called it before the throwaway culture. But I think we really need to hang on those words of dehumanizing elements of our culture. Because what is a dehumanizing element? It says, you're not a person. You're not a human being. You don't have value. You don't have worth. And I can get rid of you so easily. It happened with Jesus, and that's how they were able to kill him. That they were to see him less than human, as a thing, and they could discard him. It happens over and over and over again in a society that embraces, even values, puts forth as a value, abortion, the killing of a child. It puts forth as a value because that's not a child. It's an inconvenience. It's a problem, and you can easily get rid of that problem. To dehumanize is what? To make less than human. That you're not human, you're a thing. You're an object. And objects can what? Be discarded. What we realize, though, is we need to work hard. And I would offer 3 suggestions for this. We need to look people in the face when we meet them. When you look a person in the face, look them in the eye, you see their humanity, right? You see their wrinkles and their pimples and their blemishes, their baldness. You see all the characteristics and aspects of who they are. But when you look a person in the face, you see the gift that they are. You know, you might have crooked teeth or missing teeth or good dentures or not. You know, you may have glasses or contacts. You know, you look at people, you see that, look people in the face and see the image and likeness of God. As you do that, we need to train ourselves to do that. Image and likeness of God. Every person we look them in the eye, look them in the face. That is what God looks like. God is that beautiful. God is that awesome. God unique and special. The next thing we need to do is what? Remember that we are not just human. Let me say it again. We are not only or just human. We have divine origins. The very life of God is in us. That's what we celebrate in the sacramental life of the church, that God's grace, God's life, God's goodness, God's divine presence dwells in each and every one of us. God sustains us in being, gives us life. You are much, much more than human. And so when the dehumanizing elements of culture attack us, they're not just attacking the human in us, they're attacking the divine. Because if we realize how divinely inspired we are by God. God brought us into being and holds us and sustains us in life. We say, I'm not going to mess with the things of God. But each one of you is a beautiful creation of God. And so to remember we're more than human. That the divine lives within us. We have divine origins. We leave God to come to this earth, and one day we will return to God. That each of us is a sharer in God's life and goodness and beauty. The final thing is this. It's said now that even after the changes in the laws, more abortions are being performed than ever. And I want to say, evil works overtime. Right? Evil works overtime. And so we can never rest. We can never sit back and say, oh, we're done. We can never sit back and say, okay, laws are in place. Things are moving forward. No. Evil works overtime. And that means we have to work even so much more. I'm discouraged sometimes by going to Washington for the march. We don't have the numbers of people that we used to have. When you go to the march on Washington, the crowds are getting slimmer, the numbers of marchers lower and lower, and it's because they think, oh, we're done. They passed those laws. They've overturned Roe versus Wade. Evil works overtime, brothers and sisters. And that means we need to double, triple, quadruple our efforts. And I think as long as people of goodwill and people of faith like us are working hard, praying hard, working hard, advocating for the most vulnerable among us, there is hope. We need to keep working. Because in all of this, this struggle between good and evil, where the life of the unborn hangs in the balance, we know what happened to Jesus, God incarnate. And the call is for each and every one of us to look at Christ on the cross and say, never again. Never again should anybody be dehumanized to such an extent that people are content to refer to them as a problem, an inconvenience, something to throw away and discard. I want to thank all of you for your presence here today. And let's recommit ourselves to this important work of protecting and defending life from conception to natural death. It's hard work, but I'm sure you would agree it's worth every effort, every prayer, and all the time put in. May God continue to bless our efforts. May God give success to the work of our hands as we work to protect and defend the unborn.